Okay, so I wanted to make a video covering what I consider 10 bad or misapplied poker theories that I've seen throughout years of playing poker. Some of these come from the internet, some come from talking to people. Generally, it's low stakes live that you see this stuff a lot, but it can extend to some more advanced players. And I wanted to dispel some of these things and hopefully shed some light on some better ways of looking at the game. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer them. And if you want any hands reviewed or any feedback at all, you can put it in the comment or you can send me an email at the link that'll be in the description on the video. If you like the content, please subscribe and follow, and there'll be more videos coming. So here we go. Number 10, betting for information. This is a phrase that I've seen around since I started learning poker, about 15 years ago at this point, and it simply does not exist. There is no such thing as betting for information in poker. We get information by betting as a side effect of betting, but when we bet, we really just want to be betting with hands that are in a part of our range that prefers to bet versus check or fold or whatever else. And when we bet for information with hands that don't fall into that category, what we're really doing is just taking some of our weaker hands that are probably better off checking and turning them into bets. This is going to become a problem, and there are a lot of exploits any thinking player can take in reaction to that. One note, if you don't understand what I'm talking about with ranges, I have another video on here about ranges. I would watch that first probably before this one because I will be talking about it quite a bit in here. Anyway, our opponent's reactions to our bets is going to give us information about their range versus our range without taking a negative EV line of betting hands that don't want to bet. The other thing is opponents will give away information constantly. Pay attention to the other hands and their actions. You don't need to do things to cost yourself money when they are going to consistently give away gameplay information the entire time you're at the table with them. There's nothing saying that their reaction is going to even give you the information that you're looking for. What we do is we match our range up to theirs and we make decisions based on that. We do not bet single hands for quote unquote information. Number 9, being the big stack in a cash game. Many times new players will complain about a large stack at a low stakes game. Like let's say it's a 1-2 game and someone's like $1,500. I'll talk about that player bullying the table or being the table captain or bulldozing the table or whatever else, whatever phrase they use. There's no such thing as a big stack at a cash game. It does not exist. There's examples of big stacks in tournaments. That's absolutely real, but it's not a thing in a cash game setting. You can only play for the effective stack in the hand, not the largest stack. So if two players are heads up and one has a stack of $500, one has a stack of $100, the effective stack is $100. There's no possible way to play for the $500 stack, so there is no chip lead. The very idea of it is meaningless. This is usually a mental game leak of people being intimidated by the amount of money in front of someone. Just remember, any dollar above your own stack is not up for grabs, so it doesn't matter. Pot committed. This is a misapplication of what's generally something related to the pot odds. I cover that in my basics video on here, the basic mistakes video. And this is something a lot of times newer players will refer to themselves as being or not being pot committed. This is just sunk cost fallacy. And what I mean by that is just because we spent money on a hand, that money is gone. Once the money is in the pot, it's no longer yours. It does not exist in your stack. It is not your money. It is not part of yours for the sake of a game or anything else. We need to understand that we don't make another decision based on just the fact that we've already put money in the pot. Now, we end up calling a lot once we have a lot of money put in, but not for pot committed reasons. For example, we have ace king of hearts under the gun in a $300 stack at a 1-2 game. The cutoff opens to $12 and we 3-bet from the button to $40. Cutoff calls and the pot's $80. The flop is 10 of hearts, jack of hearts, 5 of spades. We decide to check. Cutoff bet 60 and we decide to check raise to 180. The cutoff calls and now the pot is 440 on the turn. The turn is the 2 of clubs. We check and the cutoff jams and we call. Now, I don't care if this line is perfect. It's just to illustrate the hand. But we're not calling because of the money we already put in the pot. We're calling because of the pot odds in the hand. We need to call $80 to win 520. If we plug this into our pot odds formula, we get 80 divided by the pot plus the bet plus the call. This simplifies to 80 divided by 600, which is roughly 13% equity. This hand will absolutely have that with all its draws. Many times people find themselves in pot committed situations because of errors earlier in the hand. There's spots where they should have raised and gotten it in earlier, or they called in a spot where they probably shouldn't have, and that'll lead them to thinking they're quote unquote pot committed, but really we're just at a spot where we probably shouldn't be at in the decision tree, or it's just a spot where we have to put money in because we just have too much equity not to. I hate playing with people who play everything. This is a constant line from people who either have just started the game or don't study any theory at all. You also hear I'm going to move up stakes to where they respect my raises, and I like playing with good players because I can read them. If I play any two cards, nobody will know what I have is sort of the inverse of that. We always want to play with people who play everything. If we could play with someone jamming any two cards pre-flop 100% of the time, we would always take that game. We would love that game. We'd never leave the table. If players are playing everything, they're going to have way more weak hands than strong hands, and our range is going to match up extremely favorably just by playing a slightly stronger range, and then value get betting against their weak range of quote unquote everything. Now, this read is not usually accurate. Usually, people are playing too many hands. Very few people are literally playing any two cards. But the point here is this is people who are afraid of losing money, which is usually more of a bankroll issue or a risk issue than the actual gameplay. We always want to play with players whose ranges are way too wide and who are not thinking about their decisions. It's going to be an easier game. Now, this means that we're not going to take all of the same lines that we take versus thinking players. We're not going to bluff often, if ever, some things like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to bet for value constantly. We're going to print money by doing that. Number 6, waiting for a better spot. This is one of my least favorite phrases in poker, and you hear it a lot when people are talking about getting stacks in versus a very bad aggressive opponent. So they'll say, "Oh no, we got to wait for a better spot to call, or we shouldn't getting it in here because they could have." This is a misunderstanding of how ranges match up, and it's a fear of risking money in a spot where you may not have the best hand possible. And one way to think about it, our equity advantages in poker are rarely going to be extremely large. We're not usually going to be like an 80% favorite or 90% favorite. It's extremely rare. We cannot wait for those spots to get money in with overly aggressive players. Our goal is to get the money in when we are ahead of their whole range overall. And when they're playing a bad aggressive player, a maniac as some people call them, there's going to be a lot of spots where we're marginally ahead of that the absurd range they're playing, and we don't wait for a better spot. We get the money in. Bad players have a timer over their head. They're giving money away, and we want to take it when they have the opportunity. People do not have infinite bankrolls. A lot of these recreational players may go to the casino with $500 on them or $1,000 on them or whatever, a buy-in or $2,000 on them, whatever game you're playing. Once that money's gone, they're going to leave. We want to get in pots with these people and give ourselves the best opportunities possible to take that money before it goes to someone else. We make most of our money in poker by playing against the vast majority of money in poker by playing against bad players making bad choices, especially in live poker. Online, the edges get smaller, but in live poker, this is still the case. This means getting the money in close sometimes. And part of this is monsters under the bed, which is what I mean by that is a lot of new players will decide our opponent's range is extremely strong for no real reason. Like all of a sudden they'll say something, oh, he only has a flush here, when there's no reason that we would think that the player that is betting only has these hands here. People don't change that drastically from hand to hand, and you're going to have to trust your reads sometimes within reason. You're also just going to have to do some range work and figure out when you're ahead, and that's where our money comes from. ABC poker and solid reg reads. This is really just a rant against people who don't get good reads and then use those not good reads kind of lazily. So people saying they play ABC poker, that an opponent is playing ABC poker, aren't really saying anything. And the same goes for a solid read of an opponent. Usually this is used when people, again, have not spent enough time developing good reads. What they're generally saying is my opponent is playing the form of poker that I'm comfortable seeing, so I consider it ABC because they're not doing things that I consider outlandish. And solid reg read, this one drives me nuts because it's just used way, 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 way too often. So many people talk about all these solid players out there, and solid doesn't really mean anything. Are they more aggressive? Where are their issues? What are the things they're making mistakes on? All these solid players are still having large gaping leaks, and if you're not noticing them, you're really just losing money. But reads in poker should become more specific as time goes on. If we've been at a table long enough to see what people are doing that is quote unquote ABC or solid, we should have a more detailed read. We have to challenge ourselves to get better reads on players. What are their betting frequencies looking like? Have they done anything that seems, suboptimal to you? What are some spots that they've played that you would have played different? But constantly be drilling yourself down to more specific reads. We really need to be more and more accurate as the game goes on, and these lazy reads are really not useful. And like I said earlier, people use the word solid way too often. Most live players are terrible at poker, and I'm not saying that to insult people, but the vast majority of live players, up until the 510 level, and that includes the 510 level, are really, really bad at poker. And if everyone seems solid, you're not paying enough attention, or you're going to do some more studying, because there's massive leaks coming from these people. If I can't win at Showdown, I have to bluff. This is basically a mental game block. You cannot win every hand of poker. This sounds like something that people just understand, but a ton of in-game mistakes come from people trying to win hands that they will not win any significant amount of the time, or not enough of the time to be profitable. Sometimes you just lose a hand of poker. If we bluff all our hands with no showdown value overall, we're going to have too many bluffs in our range. Even bad opponents are going to realize that they can just call us down light. Sometimes we have to give up on a hand. It happens. It's not the end of the world. I think this is an extended version of a little bit of truth, which is we often want to bluff the worst hands in our range on the river, but this doesn't mean every combination of losing hands. For example, we're on the button, cutoff opens to 12, $200 deep in a 1-2 game. We have 9-10 suited and call. Flop is ace of spades, 8 of hearts, jack of clubs, and under the gun bets 8. We raise to 24, cutoff calls. The turn is a 4 of spades, bringing a backdoor flush draw. The cutoff checks, we bet 54. River is the 4 of clubs, cutoff checks. We're going to be checking behind here. We block some of the combos we want them to have with the 9 and the 10 of missed straight draws and flush draws that we want them to fold. And the river's not a card that's going to significantly change the EV for either player, like I said. So we're going to check behind here and lose the vast, vast majority of the time. And that's okay. We lose some hands. Now, we should have some bluffs here with airier hands, but there's some other combos we'd use. I'm not going to get into that right now because it's really not the point of this video. If we bet flop, we have to bet turn. This is just an example of incongruent thought. You can feel free to replace bet in the title with call. The point is that making one action does not necessitate another. It's good to have an idea of our plan for future streets when we take an action, but this does not make our subsequent action a necessity. And a lot of times what will happen is we made a mistake, and then we try and fix the mistake by making another mistake. Like, for example, just because we made a bluff on a street that may not be great on the flop, there's no reason to keep bluffing on future streets. This is something that a lot of us get trapped in. I've done it. Everyone I know has done it. But just because we run a bad bluff or make a bad choice, we don't have to keep doing that throughout the hand. What we want to do is try and play the rest of the hand the best we can, and then go back and look at it and see what we can learn from it. So don't think that one action necessitates another just because we made the first one. That's not really logical. Slow playing. These last two entries on this list I'm probably going to do entire videos about because they're massive, massive, massive leaks of live players. People slow play hands so often, and there's something about trapping people or slow playing a hand that I think makes players feel good. It makes you feel smart. It makes you feel like you got away with something. I think there's a mental game aspect there. But people at low stakes slow play big hands way too often. In Hold'em, we have 4 betting rounds per hand at maximum. Every time we slow play, we make it harder to get stacks in with our monster hands. And we don't get monsters a lot, as we've talked about. We want to get the money in with those hands. And we sometimes need all the streets to do that. So every time we check, we reduce that ability. And a lot of this is the fear that if we bet, the opponent will fold. But that's not really accurate. The opponent's going to have a range that is going to have to float a lot of cards. And the hands that fold a lot of the time are going to be so far behind that they're not going to be bluff candidates for the opponent. And they're also not going to continue on most turns or rivers. So betting doesn't actually lose when they fold. It's just the feeling of them folding doesn't feel good to us, so we don't want it to happen. We usually only want to check these big hands in position when the board is exceptionally dry and range interactions leave the opponent with very few calling hands. This is not common. It's not nearly as common as people think. For example, we open jacks from the button and the big blind calls. Flop is jack of spades, 6 of hearts, 2 of clubs. We flop top set on a dry board. Big blind checks. We should not be checking back here. Big blind's range is going to be wide enough. They're going to have a lot of floats. They're going to have a lot of hands that have to call, and the hands that fold are not going to significantly improve on most turns and rivers to make it different that we shouldn't be betting this street. This changes a little bit, like some spots that may want some slow play are cutoff versus big blind spots, or some hijack versus big blind spots, and things like that, where the big blinds range has shrunk significantly and the other ranges are stronger than a button versus big blind situation. But in general, if you're not sure, bet your big hands. You will make more money. The slow playing is costing people tons of money. Here's number one and a big one: misapplying balance. Balance is a core theory of poker, and it's absolutely a real thing. I am not for 1 second saying that balance is not a theory of poker. However, most people use the term as an excuse for poor player. They simply don't understand it. So what's balance? Balance is taking the same action with hands in different parts of your range in order to remain unpredictable. For example, if we only 3-bet ace, ace, king, king, queen, queen, and ace, king suited, every time we 3-bet, we have incredibly strong hands. If we also 3-bet some hands like ace 5 suited and ace 4 suited, a few other weaker combos, maybe some suited connectors or whatever else, our opponent will not know that what we have is clearly when we 3-bet. That's the basic idea of balance. Balance does not mean that you have to be capable of any hand possible. We do not 3-bet 8-3 off just so that our opponents don't know if we have. We don't need every hand in our range at all times. Balance is also used incorrectly when being applied to both bluffing and bluff catching. I'm going to cover this more in a video on balance, but just understand that people tend to make an action too often, quote, for the sake of balance, and that's not usually being applied correctly. In game, and especially in live low stakes, I'll never say balance isn't important, but it's way more important to be making plus EV plays within the line you're taking versus worrying about how an opponent's going to perceive your overall range, because most of the time they're just not paying attention. And this is the last thought. I'm not going to get super into this, but sometimes I see people taking mixed strategies just so they can have a hand at any time. We only take a mixed strategy when the EV of both strategies is equal. We do not balance by sometimes checking or betting a combo for no reason. And this is a common misuse of it. So don't worry if you don't understand this part here. I'm going to cover it again more in something else, but I just want to make a note. So that's 10 poker theories that I hope I cleared up a little bit. And I know some of that might have been a little bit complicated. If it's a little bit above where you currently are, that's no problem. Ask questions in the comments. I will answer them. Email me any feedback you have. If you don't want to ask in the comments, I can answer through there as well. And subscribe or follow if you like the video. And I'll be putting some more videos up shortly, some hand histories, and like I said, I'm going to do some more on some of the topics I've covered here. So thanks for watching. I hope you follow the channel, and there'll be some more stuff coming.